السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين وبعد. Alhamdulillah, last morning we talked about the issue of mixing, or being mindful about the people that we choose as our company. And another category of behavior that can negatively affect our hearts is, I think it's described in English as gluttony, but it's basically, eating beyond your need and filling up your stomach, packing up your stomach, right? And I'm gonna preface this by saying that this is mostly, a lesson to myself first and foremost, right? Because what we've gotten to the habit where we open up our pantries, for example, and usually we have, all of us, by the blessing of Allah first and foremost, but we also have, usually if you open up your pantry, you probably have enough food in your pantry, in your home right now, to likely feed your family for quite a long time, right? More than a week or something like that. We usually, alhamdulillah, most people, or some people in different parts of the world don't have enough food even for one day. But we have, alhamdulillah, the blessing where we have the pantry full and we have enough food to suffice our family for weeks to come. But we also get into this habit of, we call it munching, or just, unnecessarily eating, or even when we're eating a meal, to eat beyond even what is, healthy for us to eat in the first place. And this is not only unhealthy for us physically, but it also has a spiritual component to it as well. And you wonder, why has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made worship in the month of Ramadan? One of the primary things that we have to do is give up eating and drinking for hours in a day. Hours in a day. Yes, things that we are not used to doing outside the month of Ramadan. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls us to do that in the month of Ramadan. Some of us are fasting 14, 16 hours a day, some parts of the world, up to 20 hours a day. But humans are able to do it. Alhamdulillah, we're able to do it. One of the things we learn in Ramadan is that we actually don't need as much intake of food as we think we do, even to function on a normal basis. Even to function. We feel hungry, we feel a little tired, we feel this, but we still get through our day. And at the same time, we are getting closer and closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's a connection that's made in Ramadan between lessening the amount of intake of food that we have, even to the point where you feel weak, but at the same time getting stronger spiritually. One of the benefits of eating the iftar meal, at the end of every day of fasting in Ramadan, every bite you take and every sip of water you take, you really appreciate it. Because you've gone the whole day, you have an empty stomach, but you really appreciate the meal that you're having. How many times, does that first sip of water, everybody in the family just says, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. The happiness is shared by the sip of water, a date, or something small. But you really appreciate the blessings that Allah Azza wa Jalla has given you. But we know that filling up our stomachs as well also is connected to other kinds of sinful behavior. And the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that in many hadith, one of them when he said, مَا مَلَأَ ابْنَ آدَمْ وِعَاءً شَرًّا مِنْ بَطْنِهِ, that the son of Adam does not fill a vessel that is worse for them to fill than their own stomach. بِحَسَبِ ابْنِ آدَمْ لُقَيْمَاتْ يُقِمْنَ صَلْبَهُ. He says, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that it's enough for a person to eat that which will keep their back straight, so they can continue on doing the work they need to do. So luqaymat is like a few morsels, right? You have a few morsels, you get a little bit of strength, you keep doing, you carry on in your day. But he recognized, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that would be hard. So he said, فَإِنْ كَانَ لَا مُحَالَ فَثُلُثٌ لِطَعَامِهِ وَثُلُثٌ لِشَرَابِهِ وَثُلُثٌ لِنَفَسِهِ. That, but if the person is going to eat more, then they should divide up their stomach into thirds, a third for food, a third for water, and a third for air. And we talked about this earlier when we mentioned this in passing, that usually when you fill yourself up, you know how much you eat to fill yourself up. And so if you break that down into 1/3 of the meal, that would fill you up completely. And subhanAllah, it seems like a big deal, but imagine in Ramadan you're going hours without eating anyway. And if you're just cutting down the meal that you eat into these thirds, this portion, then it'll be healthier for you. But you see that the Prophet ﷺ is making a clear connection that why is it really bad for us to fill this vessel, right? And he says that there's no vessel that's worse than filling. than the stomach of a person. And so this is something that leads us to having issues spiritually as well, because and I believe the word for it in English is gluttony, but it's called one of the 7 sins, right, in the other traditions as well, because it leads to you fill your stomach first, and then you fill your other desires, your desire for power, your desire for wealth, and it's sometimes associated with that as well. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Al-mu'minu ya'kulu fi mi'an wahidin, wal-kafiru ya'kulu fi sab'ati am'a." He says, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the believer eats with in one intestine, right? And basically he's talking about, it's a metaphor here, that a believer eats like they have one intestine, and the disbeliever eats like they have 7 intestines, right? He's talking about the amount of intake that people would take into their bodies. But he's connecting this, limiting the amount of food with the quality of being a believer, right? The believer eats like they have one intestine, right? I mean, we do have one intestine. That's the reality. We don't have like 7 intestines inside of us. We have this one system that is there. And so the believer is kind to their own system as well, right? They don't overburden the system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put in their bodies as well. They're respectful of the fact that they have this function. And overeating and stuffing our bodies with food also leads to other illnesses, physical illnesses as well. But there's this respect for the body as well. And another hadith, really interesting hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ta'amul wahid yakfi lithnayn," that the food for one person is enough for 2 people. وَطَعَامُ الْإِثْنَيْنِ يَكْفِي لِأَرْبَعٍ, he mentioned, he doubles it up, and the food for 2 people is enough for 4, and the food for 4 people is enough for 8. That the amount of food that normally you would eat, without this in consideration, is usually enough for double the people that are there. And I have an interesting story. I have personal experience from this. SubhanAllah, it's really, when I was in Islamic University, we were studying, I had a friend of mine. We were by ourselves, we went out and we got food. He got himself his order, I got myself my order, and my friend loved food, mashallah, right? When we came back to my house, we were sitting and we had our meal, and there was a knock on my door. And it was one of my neighbors, who's also a teacher at the university. And he shows up and he has another student with him. And so obviously, based on our ethics, our adab, our generosity, I invite him to come and join and have a meal with us. And my friend got upset. He was kind of eyeing me from the side because he said, "This was my meal. I ordered this for myself." And I said, "Just let it go. They're here. We're going to have them sit down." And alhamdulillah, we sat down, we ate, and everybody ate to their fill. And I remember we had this conversation, me and my friend, afterwards. That remember the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, food for 1 person is enough for 2. The food for 2 is enough for 4. And really, it was. It felt like everybody had their full. Everybody had their full meal. There's a physical aspect to it in that usually we eat too much anyways, and so the food that we have for 1 person is usually enough for 2. But there's also a spiritual side to it. There's the barakah that happens, the blessings that come in the meal, and blessings that come in sharing your meal, right? And the fact that you invited somebody to have the meal with you, so on and so forth. There's even rights over another Muslim that that when they invite you, you answer the invitation. So when somebody invites you, you respond to their invitation and you have a meal with them. But there's also that barakah, that spirituality aspect that's part of that meal as well. But it's just an interesting thing. We think about it, it's hard sometimes to connect the dots, but there's so many ahadith on the topic, right? That the fact that it shows you that limiting the amount of food is good for you, not just physically, but also spiritually. And interestingly enough, limiting the amount of food gives you more strength to do more worship. Because eating more food can sometimes make you, listless or lazy. But limiting the amount of food and even feeling the hunger, and again, we connect it back to Ramadan, where everyone is showing up for Fajr, everyone is staying after Isha for up to 2 hours to do Tarawih. Everyone is sitting down and forcing themselves to read more Quran, to do more zikr, right? Even being more active and volunteering and setting up the masjid and doing this and doing that. So even being more physically active when they're having less amount of food. And there's a huge lesson in this for us to understand that, subhanAllah, Allah Azza wa Jalla gave us these bodies, and He's made us capable of doing amazing things. Amazing things. And we, out of our just desire, want to feed our stomachs. But if we choose to wisely limit ourselves, when the next time we have our meal, right? Maybe we'll go and have breakfast right now. So instead of having what we would normally have, try it out. Maybe just a little bit less. Take one thing out. and then have your meal with the intention that Allah, I want to divide up my stomach, I want to act on the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, I want to limit what I eat, right? And alhamdulillah, we'll have opportunities to eat throughout the day, but it's really trying just eating that's something that's enough for us, feeling satisfied, and then stepping back and then not overdoing it. This will be better for our health. This will also be better for our spirituality. Alhamdulillah, we know that there's after sunrise, 15 or 20 minutes after sunrise is the time for Salatul Duha, right? And so maybe we don't pray Salatul Duha, but maybe if we limit our breakfast now and we have a little bit less, we go home and we feel like, I've done something good, why not follow it with something good anyways? And so now, it's 20 minutes after sunrise or more, I can pray my Salatul Duha. 2 rak'at takes maybe 4 minutes or something, but 2 rak'at, we pray Salatul Duha, and then we do, inshallah, if we start our meal off with trying to please Allah, hopefully that sets the tone for the day where we're going to do everything else in the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our deeds from us and to allow us to push ourselves to do things that we know we can do, but we don't usually do on a regular basis. Jazakumullah khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.